I'm going to do two quick problems on solving trig equations where you have to factor or you have to substitute in a different value to solve these. They're a little bit more complicated. So the first one, the idea is I'm looking at it and I have two different trig functions here. So in order to solve this, I really need to get it down to the same trig function. So what I'm going to use is the idea that, sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. So therefore, 1 minus, let's see, so therefore I can change either the sine or I can change the cosine. I'm going to change, I think, the sine function to be a cosine function. So sine squared, so if I manipulate this, sine squared x is equal to 1 minus cosine squared x. So I'm going to substitute that in. Instead of saying sine squared x, I'm going to say 1 minus cosine squared x. So now I have 1 minus cos squared x is equal to 3 cos squared x. Okay, now I have the same trig function, which is what I wanted, and I'm now going to manipulate it so I can get everything on one side and then see what to do from there. So if I bring this quantity over here and get 0 here, that's going to give me 1 minus 4 cosine squared x equals 0. Okay, so now I'm just going to solve that and try to solve for cosine. So I can do this in two ways. I can factor it if I wanted to. This is a little trickier factoring question. Or I can try to solve it and remember to do plus minus. I'm going to try to solve this one without factoring because I think most of you would probably do that. So I have, let's see. Nice. So I'm going to do 1 equals 4 cos squared x. Okay, then I'm going to divide by 4. So I have 1/4 equals cos squared x. So this is more like what I did yesterday. Now I'm going to just square root. When I square root a fraction, I square root the numerator and I square root the denominator, and I have to make sure I do plus minus. So plus minus 1/4, which is going to actually be plus minus 1/2. Okay, so from here, I'm going to think, okay, so which one of the special triangles, or is it quadrantal? It's not quadrantal because quadrantal will be 0, -1, 1, or undefined, and it's not any of those, so it's 1/2. So I think which triangle uses 1 and 2, and that would be a 30, 60, 90. Okay, so across from the 30 is the 1, across from the 90 is the 2, and across from the 60 is the square root of 3. So I think if I'm cosine, because I dropped the cosine, sorry. So if I'm cosine, I want opposite, no I don't, I want adjacent over hypotenuse. So where would I be standing that the adjacent side would be 1, and that means I'd be standing here, because the adjacent side would be 1 and the hypotenuse would be 2, so that means I'm at 60 degrees. Okay, so I want plus minus, which means I'm also in all 4 quadrants, because in order to get plus minus, I need to be thinking all students take calc. So in the first quadrant, I'm going to have 60 degrees. So I'm definitely having 60 as one of my answers. Okay, second quadrant, this is 60. So the angle I want is 180 minus 60. So that's going to be 120. Okay, then I'm down in this quadrant, and that's going to be, now I'm looking at this angle, which is going to be 180 plus 60, which is 240, right? Yep. And my last angle is going to be over here in the fourth quadrant. Okay, and that one's going to be the one that goes all the way around, which means that would be 360 minus 60, so that one's going to be 300. Okay, so these guys are all my answers for that. 60, 120, 240, and 300 would be all the answers for that particular problem. Okay, the next guy, so again, I look at it, and I don't have two trig functions, or I have two trig functions. I want one trig function. Okay, so I'm going to use the identity that makes this turn into a cotangent. Okay, so I know that 1 plus cotangent squared is equal to cosecant squared. So I'm going to turn cosecant squared into 1 plus, I'm going to substitute that. So this 2 needs to be out front, and that's going to be 1 plus cotangent squared x. And then that equals 3 cotangent squared x minus 1. So now I have everything in terms of cotangent. So I'm going to now clean it up, do some algebra. So that gives me 2 plus 2 cotangent squared x equals 3 cotangent squared x minus 1. Let's get everything to one side and see what happens. So I'm going to add the 1, that gives me a 3. I'm going to subtract the let's bring these over to the one side. So I'm going to put 0 over here. So if I subtract the 2, that's going to be minus 3. If I subtract the 2x squared, that's going to give me cotangent squared x, and then that would be minus 3. Okay. So I have that. So now I got to decide what to do. I'm not going to factor this one because this is not a factoring. So, and there's only 2 terms. So this is an example of one that I wouldn't factor it, but I'm going to solve for it at this point. So I'm going to bring the 3 to the other side. So now I have 3 cotangent squared x. Okay, and then I'm going to square root it. I'm going to leave it in terms of cotangent because I can do that. So cotangent x is equal to the square root of 3. And that's plus minus. So again, I'm in all 4 quadrants. Okay, so the cotangent is the reciprocal function of tangent. So wherever tangent is positive, cotangent's also positive. And it's just the flip of whatever the tangent is. So we know tangent is, tan is opposite over adjacent. So cotangent is adjacent over opposite. Okay, so this is going to go back to my other my 30, 60, 90 triangle again. This radical 3 lets me know it's a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So with this one, I want my 30 side to, my radical 3 to be my adjacent side. So if I go back up here, here's my radical 3. That needs to be my adjacent side, which means this is the angle I'm looking at, which means that would be 30 degrees. So in my first quadrant, I'm going to have 30 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to keep using 30 degrees in all the quadrants, and I will have the answers. Second quadrant, if that's 30 degrees, I'm going to do 180 minus 30, so I'm going to have 150. Third quadrant, I'm going to go past 180, so 180 plus 30 is 210. And then here, this is 30, so I'm going to not quite get to 360, so 30 less than 360 would be 330. Okay, and those would be the answers for those 4 quadrants because I had to do a plus minus, and in order for me to get all the plus minuses, that means it would be in all 4 quadrants. All right, now none of these I factored, but if I was to factor them, I could have factored number 1 if I wanted, but it's a little more complicated. So it was easier just to kind of go through and solve it. But that's what you would do when you want to substitute in a trig identity. I would have my trig identity chart handy so I can look at it, but that's it.